Hello and welcome to Kvikmyndapod, an Icelandic cinema podcast. I'm Rob Watts, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Ellie to journey through Iceland's cinematic landscape. It's a new year, a new series, and there's loads of good stuff for us to get stuck into. As with previous series, we talk about films from the last 2 decades of Icelandic cinema to uncover unlikely stories and characters unique to the land of ice and fire. This time round, we're hoping to be somewhat ahead of the curve by covering some films as they are released, beginning with this week's film, Beautiful Beings, or Berdreymi, from director Arnar Guðmundsson. Released in the UK on the 30th of January, this is a harsh look at violence of all kinds, focusing on a group of teenagers in a Reykjavik suburb. With fantastic performances all round, especially from its young cast, director Guðmundsson follows up Heartstone with another cracker. Before we begin, just a quick reminder that we're on social media and you should definitely follow us. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Kvikmyndapod, that's KVIKMYNDAPOD, and you can subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate a rating and or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you listen there, and if you're feeling extra generous, we have a Ko-fi page where you can support us if you like what you hear. All our links can be found on Insta, Twitter, and in the show notes. Please be warned, Beautiful Beings doesn't shy away from its subject matter with on and off screen depictions of violence and bullying, so please consider this a trigger warning for the film. Over to me and Ellie. Happy New Year, Ellie.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me at your new pad, just 2 minutes down the road from me.
I know, how good is that?
Very convenient.
Yeah, and I've got so much more space. We've actually got room to sit and have computers out and not be all on top of each other.
It's a glimpse of behind the scenes there.
Yeah. Anyway, it's 2023, a new year, new house, new series of
New me?
Kvikmyndapod. Is there a new you?
No, definitely not. The
no
same
New Year's
old
resolutions.
Tired, haggard me from 2022 is still here.
Yeah. I thought that this would be a fresh new start, but already
No.
tired. But yes, we're going to do another series. This is series 5.
What?
I know, insane. It's been 2 years since we started this podcast.
That is actually crazy, isn't it? Somebody said to me recently that it's almost 3 years since the first lockdown, and I just could not believe that.
3 years since the first lockdown?
Yeah. Think about it.
Wow.
Time flies.
It really does. But yeah, this series is going to be a bit different. I think we're going to drop episodes every now and then rather than every single Monday or Friday for a 6-week period.
Keep people on tenterhooks.
Yeah, so everyone just keep your eyes on your podcast feeds. There's a lot of good new stuff coming out, so we're going to sort of try and cover those films as and when they drop. And we might do a couple of other films in between. But it's going to be a bit more sporadic because life is starting to get in the way a bit more these days. But we're starting 2023, Series 5, with quite an amazing film called Beautiful Beings.
Beautiful in some ways, hideous, upsetting and brutal in other ways.
Very, very true. Yeah, this is Arnar Guðmundsson's follow-up to Heartstone, which we covered a couple of series ago, which we really loved, I think. Berdreymi in Icelandic. And basically, it's another sort of teen kind of coming-of-age film. This time not set out in the countryside, but set in the kind of suburbs of Reykjavik, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, it's about the challenges of deprivation, violent families or unreliable families, trying to kind of forge your own identity against a lot of difficult surroundings. Quite similar to Let Me Fall in some ways as well.
Yeah.
Hélt mér lónum á sér, brosti, vildi sýna mér alla liti heimsins.
Þegar ég vaknaði í morgun, þá fannst mér ég þurfa að hvetja þig til þess að opna fyrir undirmeðvitundina.
Samkvæmt skýrslum lögreglu hefur ofbeldi meðal ungmenna verið vaxandi vandamál á Íslandi. Vitum við raunverulega hvað er í gangi í lífi barnanna okkar?
Hei, tjekkið á þessu. Stíkurinn í sjónvarpinu sem var ráðist á. Sjá þetta grey.
Hverjir eru þið?
Shit. Þeir eru vinir minn.
Hvernig vissir að þú voru að koma? Ertu skyggn?
Mamma, komstu til mér í draumi í nótt?
Svenni komur aftur heim.
Hann að gera eitthvað við þig og systurina?
Sumt ekki okkar til að hafa áhrif á.
Ég reyndi alltaf vini mína. En það kom risastór örn og tók mig á loft. Einu sinni dreymdi mig að ég var með vini mínum.
Balli, a young teenager from a low socioeconomic background, is a target of constant bullying at school when fellow teen Addi invites him to hang out with his group of friends, including Siggi and Konni. With absent or abusive parents, the kids are left to negotiate the relatively boring but often violent life of teens in the city. Now that sounds quite heavy, but quite straightforward. However, running alongside the realism is a streak of supernaturalism in the form of Addi and his mother's psychic visions that may point to a devastating conclusion.
Yeah, strange combo, isn't it, really? Because we've got a kind of kitchen sink drama about the struggle of life in a violent home and you know, the challenges of, as you say, deprivation and difficult families. And then we've got, this really strange supernatural element thrown in there as well, which I think added to this. What do you think?
Well, I wasn't sure about this on first watch because I watched this for the first time pre-Christmas when we thought it was going to be released on December the 19th. And basically the BBFC made a cut and it's been pushed back and is now released on January the 30th.
Oh, did you see the bit that's been cut then?
I did, yeah. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Interesting.
But on first watch, I was a bit like, what's this supernatural stuff going on? It feels a bit like, is antithetical the right word?
Yeah.
To the main plot of the story. Like, it feels so realistic. And then suddenly we've got this boy dreaming about flying with an eagle and, all these weird visions. But actually on second watch, this is why a second watch can be so fruitful, is that actually I was able to understand what he was seeing, why it might influence the plot more. But it still feels very strange to have this supernatural, because we've not really seen anything supernatural apart from vampires and demons.
But I guess what this does well is that the supernatural elements are fairly nuanced or a bit, you know, they're up for interpretation. So you could say, oh, he's just having these kind of evocative dreams or he's having some kind of, you know, mental health hallucination.
Yeah.
You could interpret it that way. I don't think it's not like a fairy just flying in and doing something. It's in the context of, it's very much his experience. It's coming from his mind. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, but we also got his mother who has the same kind of visions and appears in his visions. And she's kind of, you mentioned a fairy godmother, she's kind of that figure in a way. Obviously, she's his mother, but she kind of directs him and sort of explains like what the visions might mean or even not to act on what he sees kinds of things. This is Addi we're talking about, isn't it?
See, I do actually think, having said, you could interpret it as a dream or a hallucination, I do think it's intended as a supernatural element. But I think what I quite like how it's kind of unglamorized and it's just embedded into that world. Yeah. I'm reading Beyond Black by Hilary Mantel at the moment, and that's about it's a fairly old book. It's from the 2000s, but it's about a medium, a psychic, who tours, Bolton Civic Hall or whatever, does the usual medium stuff, but can genuinely see dead people. And it's about how that supernatural element is integrated into the mundanity. So when you stop at a service station and you've got a spirit guide with you, how you've got to wait for them to get in the car before you can drive off from the service station. And to me, this felt kind of quite nicely built into the normal stuff.
Yeah, it didn't feel, especially visually, it didn't feel different to the rest of it. I agree. But let's start at the beginning.
Got ahead of ourselves.
We jumped ahead a little bit, but that's fine. It's just this is such a realistic film, a portrayal of life in Reykjavik in the early noughties. I think that's when it's set. Certainly the phones we see, the kind of lack of things to do, the cigarettes. This film must be sponsored by cigarettes. My God, I've never seen so many in a film. But we're back in the early noughties in Reykjavik, which is a time, according to the news and according to some stuff I read online, when violence amongst teens was rife in the city. And there was a massive study done in 2004 by someone called Gerður Rún Guðlaugsdóttir. And it basically said, violent behaviour among adolescents is on the rise. This is due to kind of home life, negative events at home, and all sorts of other factors, but it was really kind of a terrible thing that was happening at the time. And I guess that kind of runs hand in hand with what we learnt in Let Me Fall, which was the kind of drugs epidemic that was happening. So we're sort of plunged right into this time and place where, kids are just aggressive. Especially the boys are aggressive anyway. And we see Balli, and he's... Poor Balli. He comes from this broken home. He lives with his mum and his sister sometimes, and just visually, you know that he's
such a tragic figure.
Yeah,
I think often in films as well, you know, kids who are shown as being from difficult homes, they're actually like incredibly attractive, or you know, they've put them in some rubbish clothes, but they've made them really appealing and smart and charming despite it all. Whereas he's not, he really, you can tell how he's kind of been broken by this, and he's not particularly an appealing character, apart from we find out he does have a kind heart ultimately deep down, but he's kind of, the way he even carries himself, he's like cringing through life and like trying to make himself smaller in the way that he walks and the way
hunched over
and it's such like it sounds so horrible to say he's like a pathetic figure, but he is. That's what his life has made him.
Yeah, and what we don't know is why that is. We see his mum's obviously sort of a recluse, or more of a kind of absent figure. She's there. We learn that she buys him food and then disappears for ages.
Neglectful.
Neglectful, that's the word, isn't it? Yeah. So he spends a lot of his time at home in a dirty home, because why should he clean up? Which is an attitude obviously been passed down to him.
But he also is, you know, how old is he?
I think 13, 14. Yeah.
Like 14-year-old boys are not going to be the best cleaners.
It's true. It's very true.
In the best of situations. But yeah, that home, the scene of his flat is so grimy and depressing, and everything looks like caked in years of muck and mess.
It's pretty grim. It's not dog poo on the floor, it's dog sick. Oh. Yeah. It is interesting though. We see so much of what may have made him how he is, but there's so much more that we learn throughout the film.
Hvað ertu að gera? Ertu í gaurinn í sjónvarpinu sem var ráðist á? Ertu hann að skera þig? Ertu eitthvað heimskur eða? Nákvæmlega, heimskur. Chico. Hvað í þessu? Új, maður. Það virkar alveg. Virkar. Kláraði restina.
Kom svo, kláraðu það. Takk maður. Vel gert.
Shit, hvað ertu búin að gera?
Góði, við skulum hjálpa þér heim.
Ekki. Æ, látt hann bara í þessu. Ekki. Ná bara eftir að æla yfir.
Góður eða?
Yeah, the beginning really reminded me of the start of Let the Right One In. We see the scene of him being beaten by the boys, them telling him to scream, him screaming, which is a horrible moment, them putting his eagle jacket in the toilet and even hitting him with a tree. Like that's next level bullying. Like, it's just, I don't know, teens are the worst. Bullies are the worst. Like I spoke about this on the Evolution of Horror podcast. Like, in many ways, the horror of Let the Right One In is just the actual human nature of bullying and childhood, not the vampires. And in this film, the horror of the whole film is violence, but the violence comes from children as well as adults, and it's
And you can tell that he's just totally alone at the beginning of this film, completely alone, which is so sad.
Which makes it really interesting when Addi decides to befriend him. And I still don't know why he does that. Like, they're obviously bored, because we meet Addi, Siggi and Konni when they're burning books and they're just bored at lunchtime and stuff. And they're taking the piss out of Balli in his mask after he's had his nose broken or whatever. And they're taking the piss, but then for some reason Addi decides to make friends with him.
Don't you think that Addi is the moral part of this movie? And really, he's seeing that Balli is vulnerable and lonely. And so he almost takes him under his wing as an act of kindness, I think. I think it's that simple.
You think it's kindness? You don't think it's just something to do?
No, I think for the others it is. And for the others, you know, these male friendship groups when you're teenagers, and it's the same for girls, but in different ways, I think, that then develop this, you know, hierarchy, and there's got to be someone at the bottom that gets picked on.
Yeah.
And I think for the others, if they have Balli, then, for example, Siggi isn't the one getting beaten up.
Sure.
But getting blamed for everything, or you know, getting the piss taken out of him. They have a new person to fill the bottom of the rung. And you see that in all these ridiculous, annoying teen boy fights they have all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my notes was just like, oh God, teen boys are the worst.
Yeah.
They've got to just always be like fighting and like touching each other and like wrestling. And I remember from school that being a thing, like that the boys just, I don't know whether there's some kind of tension that they had to work out there, or it's a social hierarchy thing, or both.
I think certainly both.
They've always got to be like touching and wrestling and some kind of
I think my friendship group, I was certainly lower down the hierarchy, but it was mostly teasing. Like it was it was
not
verbal,
bullying.
not actual physical. There was occasional physical stuff, but like nowhere near as much like punching and like pushing and wrestling. But the verbal stuff is horrible and harsh on its own. I'm sort of glad that I didn't get beaten up like that, even in a friendship group as well.
I was going to say, because of course at the start we see the bullies treatment of Balli, and then the way that they act within the friendship group when he becomes part of this friendship group, like you say, is quite toxic in some ways, fighting and teasing and always like beating each other up, strangling each other.
Well, that's just, I think, the strangling thing is, oh, we're bored, let's play a game.
Yeah.
That's not, I want to strangle you.
But there's kind of that intimacy where they are beating up on each other, but it's kind of like in a different way to the bullies. It's...
Yeah.
it's done in the way of like creating intimacy and reinforcing it. And
For sure. I think the film itself literally is about violence and the different kinds of violence there is. And, you know, that's, bullying, abusive parents, or how it, creates friendship or manifests itself within a friendship group. And Balli, for his sins, is, replaces Siggi in the lowest rung of that ladder. But Addi, I feel like Addi didn't bring him in so Siggi doesn't get bullied as much.
no.
I'm not really sure why he cares so much. Like, obviously he comes from a family that are more caring, and his mother, certainly, she's a single parent, but she has a young daughter and a young son who she looks after and wants the best for. And so maybe some of that has rubbed off. And she's portrayed as a kind of hippie, or I'm not really sure what you would term her. Turns
new
out,
age kind of vibe.
Yeah, well, at one point, Addi talks about having gone to what's it called? An Ananda Marga school? And now, I mean, I haven't done much research in that, but it's like some sort of, I don't know, yoga, meditation, spiritual organization. So like what a school that teaches that would be like, I don't know. But certainly I imagine it talks about compassion and love and friendship and all of that, which I guess none of the other kids have experienced in the same way.
It also feels like maybe Addi is a step further on than Konni and Siggi, in terms of that they're just like, let's fight all the time, let's be gross, let's do stupid stuff. And he's kind of the mitigating force. He's trying to be like, come on guys, let's not fight all the time, let's not do crazy stuff all the time. And maybe in Balli he senses, if he brings someone else in, that he is a bit more sensitive perhaps. And maybe he's searching for a more intimate connection than what he has with his current friends, which is more laddie bants.
Laddie bants.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Do you think Addi is the leader of this group then? Because I'm sure that in that voiceover he talks about Konni being the leader.
I think Connie's the leader on the surface.
Sure.
And Addi is maybe like the moral guide.
Yeah, he's the one that's sort of, pushing them into certain directions.
But Konni, I guess, is like the loudest, the most brash, the one getting into the fights, the one leading them on like missions to get into trouble. He's the ringleader. But Addi is maybe the one that everybody like actually likes and respects the most.
Yeah, and I think that scene when the boys have been to the swimming pool with the girls and then go to get drink from this party, I think that's kind of a representative scene of Konni and Addi's roles in the friendship group, because you're like, okay, Konni gets angry quickly and absolutely loses his mind. His fuse goes off and he starts beating people up left, right and centre. But Addi knows that's wrong, can't control Konni, of course, although he does pull him out of the party, but he doesn't think that's the right thing to do. And I guess those are the two character traits we see most of both of them. Konni like leading the way, but no one else really wanting to follow. But that scene is
brutal.
Flipping hell.
The scenes of like violence and brawls and fighting in this are really like disturbing. There's the other one later where Addi ends up stealing the guys come to beat up Konni and Addi ends up stealing their car. And that is really scary.
Properly scary.
Because the violence feels very real. It doesn't feel stagey or glamorized or anything like that.
Well, not at all. And I think growing up, I was aware of like other groups of kids coming around the corner. You're like, oh shit, run. This is like, they do want to beat us up or whatever. And it's so true to life. Like there's no one else around where they are in Reykjavik. Like it's just quiet suburbia, but under the surface, these, tensions are running high, and the violence, like you say, it's just all so brutal. Like that party, this film, it's weird because this film looks so stunning, but the violence is so brutal. It's like almost at a head with the beauty of the film. So Konni goes barreling into that party, hits someone with a candlestick, some heavy object anyway, barrels, like beats up a few people, and then he pushes that door open into a girl, which is like, shit. I definitely exclaimed out loud at that point, like, fucking hell. And then he doesn't stop punching at all. And like, something has to have happened to make a person like that, I think. And you kind of get drip fed reasons why Konni might be the way he is. Like Addi talks about he's shit scared of his father for whatever reason. And, we'll find out later something else about him. But like...
Again, it's all about these cycles of violence. And we've got bad dads.
Bad dads.
Bad dads back on the scene. It's always bad dad cycles of violence.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that you've got bad dads. You've got... Certainly Connie's dad feels like he must be a proper bully.
Yeah.
Siggy's dad, while he may not be physically threatening, is certainly a horrible, horrible person. But Addi's dad, he's absent, but he's not a twat in that same way.
Yeah, but the scene, let's talk about the scene with Addi's dad, because it's interesting, because when he first comes into the scene, you're thinking, yeah, okay, this guy is like really nice. What's going on here? He's really reasonable. He's setting like boundaries and stuff. But as the scene kind of progresses, I think you do get an insight into the problems in that relationship. So,
Definitely.
He says, I've stopped drinking. And then the mum says, how long for? He's like, 30 days. Oh, well, just spirits. I'm still, and she says, you smell of beer.
Yeah.
So clearly that's something that's been swirling around in the past. And then also this sense of, he might be quite charming and affable, but when they're at the bus stop and he's saying bye, you can tell that Addi's saying, can you stay? Can you hang out longer? And he's waving, basically dismissing him. He doesn't seem to care that much. It seems like he's turning up for the good time, for a nice visit every month, and then
it's a token visit. But I mean, do they even do anything? Like, they plan to go swimming. Addi doesn't want to go swimming, and then the next thing we see, he's bought them both a hot dog, and he's getting on a bus.
Yeah.
And the fact that he cracks open a beer in front of him, like he couldn't wait to get away from his son to do that.
Yeah.
It's
problematic.
It's problematic. We've seen so many drunk parents in these films from Iceland, and it's always the same. But I don't want to compare bad dads, really, but he's sort of the softer edge of a bad dad. Is that fair?
He's like low down on the bad dad scale.
Yeah, he's not there.
Yeah.
And he has his issues, but he's not taking it out on Addi.
Yeah.
It's still mentally probably horrible, but at least Addi has his mum. Whereas, Balli has no one. Konni, I don't know, can't remember about Connie's mum, whether he's got one. And then Siggy's mum has some sort of disease. It's interesting that Siggy and Konni don't get sort of, their family life isn't developed in the same way as Balli and Addi. There's not much to laugh about in this film, but Siggy's revenge on his dad is brilliant, isn't it?
Horrible.
It reminded me of, have you ever seen, this is a weird film to bring up during this discussion, but Van Wilder, Party Liaison.
No, but does that have a colon in it? Van Wilder, Party
Liaison. It was basically it was Ryan Reynolds.
Sounds terrible.
It was like not a spin-off, but like it was that American Pie era. So we're talking teens, but and at college. Anyway, at some point in that film, someone fills cream donuts with dog semen instead of cream.
Oh no.
And you can see why I was reminded of that film here.
I can see why you're reminded of that.
Because, Siggy, it comes to something when you hate your dad enough to wank off a dog.
You need to finish.
To make ice cubes so your dad ends up drinking that dog semen with his whiskey.
It's dark. There is some really dark stuff in this film, I think. Like the little details about the grim realities of their life. It also made me think of a book, Shuggy Bane. I know I always bring up Shuggy Bane.
You did bring that up quite a lot. In fact, I bought the follow-up to Shuggy Bane the other day, having not read Shuggy Bane.
Oh, well, you should read Shuggy Bane. But the kind of, just the details of growing up as a boy in this kind of grim, deprived background, everything just being kind of tainted or made dirty and gross. And that was something I felt kind of throughout this.
Yeah, everything, it's almost tactile, isn't it? How gross everything is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with Balli, it's more present. And I love that scene when they chuck him in the bath. Because don't you think it's like the relationship, I think that's the point where you realise that, yeah, they're beating on each other. There's all this like
but there's love
dry humping and whatever. It's all kind of violent but fun. And then you see the tender moment of Konni actually like washing Balli's hair and wiping him down. It's like, ah.
Hæ, þú varst bara eftir að bleita hárið. Hvað þið? Nei, já. Nei, Konni, við hefum verið að sjá þetta maður.
I think that's a really important element here, isn't it? And there's quite a few moments like that of the tenderness between the boys. And you can that kind of reinforce what they mean to each other. They're like banded together, they're a little band of brothers in a war zone, basically, or the war zone of the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's us against the world, basically. Whether that's, abusive parents or the boyfriend of someone that Konni slept with, or because that's where half of the violence comes from. Konni kissed some guy's girlfriend, so then they need to gang up together to defend Konni.
It's also quite a kind of comment on toxic masculinity generally. Like the way that masculinity is shown in a lot of these scenarios is violence, and that's the way to stamp your authority or to get some respect. Like in this context. But then also there are those, like you say, those moments of tenderness that to counteract that. So there's a point quite near the end where Addi says, "I don't feel good" or something. He's talking about like kind of in his mind. He's like, I don't feel well. And then somebody laughs, and then maybe it's Konni says, "That's a fine thing to say. Like, leave him alone." This idea that maybe they are trying to support each other. And again, this idea that they go about it totally the wrong way, but the final climax of the movie where they shall we talk about it? Yeah,
we'll talk about Balli's dad.
The final climax of the movie where they gang up to attempt to go threaten Balli's stepdad.
Yeah.
Obviously, they approach that in a really stupid way.
Very.
But the motivation behind it is to protect their friend and his sister and to look after him. It's not well executed, but again, that tenderness there of we can't let him live in this horrible situation.
Yeah, and that's like you say, another example of violence being used in a different way, like violence as defense. Violence as protection, isn't it? Like, it's stupid because they've all fallen out quite badly before this, and then they all come together. Konni basically threatens them that if they don't do it, they're not friends, which is a strange thing to do. And Siggi actually does step out of the... Does he? Yeah, Siggi's not there, is he?
No, he is there.
He is there. Siggi,
but he says initially, "I don't want to do it," and then he's like, "If you don't do it, we're not going to be friends anymore."
Yeah.
And then he's like loitering at the back, basically.
So he turns up but doesn't actually really do very much. It's a terrible idea. Because, I mean, basically we find out Balli's stepdad is Ólafur Darri Ólafsson, mountain man.
In most evil, horrible form
so
here.
Horrible, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, everything he says, like, most lines that he delivers in this film are kind of, if he was a nice man, they would sound really lovely and Like he cared for his family. He's like, oh, come here, let's have a group family hug. And
but it's almost other people's reactions to him, isn't it? That give it all away. That they do give that family hug, but they've all got like these kind of horror-stricken, frozen looks on their faces.
Yeah, it's like you can see the sinisterness behind his eyes, and the palpable sense of like how scared they are to be near him. There's the scene when they're playing Jenga at the table, and Svenny, his name's Svenny, he's like calls his daughter or stepdaughter in, and Balli's mum is just like looking around like, oh my god, this isn't good. She knows exactly what's going on, but is like powerless to do anything against him.
Yeah, she was a really tragic figure, wasn't she? I thought she was well played. This kind of lost woman who is so broken that she can't stand up for herself in any way. There's a point where they say, well, why doesn't your mum just divorce him? And then Balli says, well, he'd kill her.
Yeah. And
she's so trapped, but the way that she plays that role with these like darting eyes all the time, kind of looking for like an escape route or a way out, is really sad. But then on the other side, she's not doing anything to protect her children.
No. I don't know. What could she do? Like, they're all just waiting for him to do something and end up back in prison again, because that's the safest place for him to be and for them to be from him. So you sort of understand why the kids then want to... The idea is to threaten Svenny, right?
Yeah.
Not to actually do anything.
Yeah.
But then...
I mean, they clearly look like teenage boys. They're wearing masks and balaclavas
and they're
everything.
Not very tall. Like they're,
exactly.
They're relatively big teens, but not adults.
Putting on a deep voice and saying, don't come back here again. But it's like, clearly you're in a teen. You are not going to be able to stand up to this man who, I don't even know how much he would weigh, but like the weight he can like throw around and that kind of terrifying combination of like, he's large, but he's also tall and somebody who's got just like so much presence.
Physical presence, yeah.
And so much kind of heft behind him that there's no way a 14-year-old boy, let alone a 16-year-old, there's no way a 14-year-old boy is going to be able to take him on.
No. We see it play out, don't we? Like, Chekhov's gun actually doesn't quite play out the way Chekhov's gun usually plays out, but it certainly leads to something bad. Like, we know there's a shotgun in the cupboard, and they, of course, they go and get it and threaten Svenny with the gun. It just takes that split second of Connie to take his eye off the ball, and then it all comes unraveling, doesn't it?
And that scene was horribly tense when they're creeping into the house to try and threaten him.
It's so quiet. Like, the film has such a kind of otherworldly almost score, and then we get into that moment and it's almost just silent, and you see them tiptoeing up the stairs knowing that this is a bad idea.
It's one of those classic things where they say before they do it, this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do this. And it's like, well...
Listen to your own advice.
It's teenage boys again.
Yeah.
Nei, sko. Guðmundur. Gott að vera komin heim.
And I really liked the juxtaposition between, you know, we saw them choking each other out earlier on in a friendly, in inverted commas, way. And then we see it again. So we sort of know how much Connie can take, but coming from this absolute beast of a man who's we know is a violent, abusive person, like, he is going to kill Connie if something isn't done. He's like so close. And when they were doing it to each other, I felt kind of like sick.
Concerned,
yeah, I was like, it made me feel really horrible. But then seeing it again in the context of pure, like, I don't know, attempted murder, it was really tough to watch. Like, this film should be called like Beautiful Beings in brackets brutal. Just like the whole thing is just all brutal. Like, we see so much violence on screen, but so much is still kept off. But what we do see is just, really tough to watch.
You raised an interesting point there about the title. What do you see as the title's meaning?
I've got no idea. I hadn't thought about it. Beautiful beings. Who are the beautiful beings?
Don't you think it was these boys? So they're like, they were beautiful souls, but they've been corrupted by the world that they have to inhabit.
Yeah. But
who else would the beautiful beings
Well, certainly not the parents. I guess it must be. I don't know what Berdreymi means. Shall I have a quick translate? See if that means anything else. Nightmare. So not anything to do with beautiful beings.
A very different title.
Yeah. I guess it fits 100%. Like, this
Nightmare
film
feels more appropriate.
Yeah, and also plays into that idea of Addi's visions as well, because he really does have a couple of nightmares, like the vision of the person in the garden, or the black figure in the corner of the room when they're all
black figure in the corner of the room is really haunting.
That's properly like Babadooky, isn't it? And then that sort of almost like moving painting when Addi visions that Svenni is doing something to his stepdaughter, and we see the bruises on her legs and in her thighs, and he's standing in the corner of the room. That's like proper nightmare fuel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like, like you say, an old oil painting or something. It's got a really, but again, it's all very like fleshy and gross. Again,
it's like almost bruised. Everything is bruised, and the colours are sort of purpley, and everything's kind of moving a little bit. Ugh. But I don't know, in terms of beautiful, what makes, to quote One Direction, what makes them beautiful?
Oh God, really combining highbrow and lowbrow here.
For sure. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's the beauty in friendship. That group of friends, we know that they treat each other strangely, but there's beauty in everything that leads to friendship. And I don't know about the ending. We only see Addi and Balli. Is it their friendship? Are they the two beautiful beings? Because Konni and Siggi sort of disappear a bit. It's like almost like Addi invited Balli into the group to disrupt the mechanics of that friendship, but it's almost just exploded that friendship and left the two of them to go off on their own.
I think what's sad is that, in this film, you look at all the parents that are just terrible people, and you think, what made them like that? And it's probably because they had terrible parents who made them like that. And so part of me is thinking, well, maybe Balli, because it seems at the end like maybe Balli has been fostered.
Yes, at
he's
that
got
point, yeah.
much kind of cleaner clothes. He looks much healthier.
His hair's been washed.
His hair's been washed. And it feels like Balli has maybe been fostered. He's taken out of that scenario. Addi probably seems like he's going to take himself out of that scenario. Like, after everything goes so wrong and he gets in so much trouble, it's clear that he would have the family support from his mum to step away from that. That maybe they're, going to be able to escape from this environment and move on to something better. But it does feel like maybe Konni and Siggi are destined, as a lot of people are, to just become the next generation, like, that's going to continue this cycle.
Yeah, and you really hope that that's not the case. We don't want Konni to become Svenny, do we?
Embittered and angry and having to put that anger into violence and maybe addiction.
Yeah, and we know that they've already been playing with substance abuse. They do take mushrooms. That's one of the bigger scenes involving mushrooms where they've taken them. We see Addi's vision of him lifting up the lava fields, which is cool, and he captures the sun, and that sort of, to me, added like, well, obviously that's not real, but they are taking mushrooms. So am I supposed to believe that the other visions are real?
Yeah, that confused things a bit,
blurs things a little bit. So we know that they're playing with substance abuse, so it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that, as they grow up, Konni and Siggi could then, especially Konni, would continue that abuse with what we see in Let Me Fall, like much more hardcore drugs. It wouldn't be hard to get your hands on those, would it?
The scenes I also found really stressful was like when older teenagers who were probably like 18 or something, then like took them under their wing almost and started this party. Like
the way Konni looks up to them.
Yeah, that idea of like getting in with the wrong crowd is very applicable here, and getting into scenarios and circumstances that you're just like totally in over your head and you're not mature enough to deal with.
Yeah, and
scary.
Addi can see that, but has no real power to stop that happening, because the prime example is Blaya Hinriksson's character, the skinhead who comes into Balli's house with Konni in a wildly different role to his one in Heartstone, to the point I didn't even realise it was him.
Wait, I don't think I did realise it was him. Which one is he?
So the skinhead is a beautiful blonde, in inverted commas, beautiful being from Heartstone. Like, it was all like soft skin and lovely early teen heartthrob. And in this, he's like, oh my God, absolute horrible, tattooed knobhead. But the fact that Konni looks up to him is, you can tell it's dangerous and worrying immediately. And then I guess this leads on to the scene we were talking about right at the beginning, the cut scene. So we're at this party, aren't we, that they're having at Balli's house, and they're all having quite a good time, but they've taken mushrooms. Connie's taken too much. And I mean, this is like the most hardcore thing we've covered on this podcast, but Addi is suffering a little bit, but he kind of gets himself together. Siggi's having a great time, just dancing, and sort of, he's got his eye on Balli's sister, but nothing's happening there. And then suddenly Connie's not around. So Addi goes to Balli's bedroom, where we see the hole in the door, which we saw, violence and violence. It's really interesting because play violence and getting
Makes
your
the hole.
aggression out makes the hole. So Connie's made the hole. And then that hole is used to witness the most despicable act of violence in this film, which in the UK cut, you don't really see anything of. Did you? I'm intrigued by that. Did you know what was happening there?
Yes, absolutely.
You could tell. Yeah. So obviously, Konni is getting raped by one of the older boys. I couldn't tell whether it was Simon or not.
I think maybe it was.
Yeah, he was a skinhead, but you don't see much of him. But like, the only scene that stuck in my head, definitely for worse, was this scene from the first time I watched it. And I think they maybe cut 2 seconds out of this film for it to get its UK release.
So it's released as a 15 in the UK?
No, it's still released as an 18.
Okay.
But it was a compulsory cut of underage abuse, which if you look on the BBFC website, it literally says a phrase, something like that.
And so the Icelandic release contains those.
I assume so, yeah. And it is really, really grim and horrible. And I mean, yeah, I don't want to really paint the picture, but you see much more detail of Konni in position, and it's bad. And it's like,
I don't think for the storytelling purposes, having seen only the cut version, that would have been necessary.
Well,
I think
that's good to know.
For the narrative, you know everything you need to know from what remained.
I think so. I think for me, having seen it with that little bit cut, the shot itself feels a little bit messy. That scene feels weirdly cut because I guess there's not much you can do other than chop that little bit out, so it kind of jumps at one moment. But perhaps having not seen that moment, you wouldn't really notice.
No, I don't think you would.
Which is great because, yeah, if you don't have to see violence like that, I don't think we need to. You get the message, and then you totally sort of understand what, if this has been a repeated thing, why Konni is just so angry all the time. It doesn't get reported. You wonder and hope whether it will continue now that it's been spotted.
I didn't read it as a repeated situation.
Did you not?
I kind of read it as a one-off moment.
Oh, really?
But I guess it's not clarified either way, is it?
No. Perhaps it's not a repeated thing. Perhaps, yeah, Connie's looking up to Simon as a new friendship relationship, that someone he can look up to, and Simon exploits that.
Yeah.
But you know, if it was a repeated thing, there are examples of abused developing that kind of relationship with.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sort of see it in Balli's mum and dad. She doesn't want to let go. She won't leave him, and when she's around him, she acts like she tells him she loves him. She's trapped. She's trapped, and perhaps Konni is the same. I don't know. It's not fleshed out, is it? But we do know that he's had a traumatic experience, and you can understand why they kind of then move the way they do towards this act of aggression towards Svenny. It's all violence. This film is just violence.
Violence begets violence.
One thing I wanted to say, not to sort of lighten the mood a little bit, is I noticed that whatever area of Reykjavik they are sort of running around in, so you see them behind the houses in that little neighborhood where you've got the little picket fences running along. I was like, I recognized that road, I think, from the video for Hoppy Potter by Sigur Rós, which I was like, oh, cool. It's the same location. Obviously, we see the same locations pop up every time we watch films, but because Reykjavik is a tiny place. But what I thought was really interesting is the video to Hoppy Potter is old people running around playing like children. So you see them jumping in puddles, which is what the title of the song actually means. And you see them playing Knock Down Ginger. You see them playing like pirates with another group of old people as children. And I just thought it was really interesting that it's like the opposite of what we've got here in this film.
Yeah.
We've got these adults playing children innocently. Whereas in this film, we've got children like trying to act as adults and not playing as children at all, really. It's that kind of, weird juxtaposition between the two. I just thought, I don't know whether anyone has made that connection before, but I just thought it was really interesting to see the same location, but played out in like two mirror images of each other.
They probably have never made that connection, Rob. That's the way your brain works.
I guess. But yeah, it was pretty cool, I thought. Anything else we want to talk about to try and lighten the mood a little bit? I mean, we should say
the dog was called Abba.
The dog was called Abba, yeah. That's
all I've
fun.
got. That
Probably
is all I've got.
Not named after the band, though, I'm sure. Like, I really like that everyone has nicknames,
Mm.
because we've got, Balli, Addi, which is short
Siggi.
for Baldur, and Arnar, I think. Is it Arnar?
Siggi and Konni.
Siggi and Konni, probably short. Abba's probably short for something. Pretty cool. But we should name these actors, because, like, before this film, they were not actors. So I read that director had to find kids who could do these roles from just the general populace, from the streets, and they basically trained them for a year.
Did an amazing job,
didn't he?
Yeah.
Or didn't they? Everyone who was involved.
But I think sometimes, child actors, they are better when you just find kids and kind of put them in a scenario like normal kids, rather than going for some kind of like stage school. I am an actor, child,
Yes.
and I will act. Like, these are for these kind of naturalistic roles.
Completely. And I think the director was like very keen to get people to inhabit these roles, but when they're not on camera, not be those kids. So the kids are aware that this stuff happens.
No method acting.
Yeah.
That seems healthy.
Well, apparently, I don't know if this is actually true, but in Heartstone, I can only assume it was the actor who played Thor.
Oh.
I think he sort of did become method and was Thor the whole time throughout filming, which is probably dangerous for adults to do that, really.
Yeah.
But for impressionable young teenagers,
not good.
Not good. So I think the director was very much like making sure that the environment was, when we're filming, you're those characters. When we're not, you're yourselves. But I'm going to name all 4 of them because they were incredible,
amazing.
Weren't they?
Each of them was amazing.
They really were.
Hats off to them.
Yeah, and so individual. Their characters were so specific as well, weren't they? Yeah. So as Addi, we got Birgir Dagur Bjarkason, who reminded me of a kind of young Guy Pearce.
I can
see that. Yeah. Askul Einar Palmason was Balli. Victor Benoni Benediktsson, Konni, and Snorri Rán Frimanson as Siggi. Now, all unknown non-actors, and absolutely
Smashed
brilliant.
it.
Yeah, and like to hold your own against Ólafur Darri Ólafsson. It's quite something, isn't it? So that's 2 films in a trot that Guðmundur and Guðmundsson has kind of brought brilliant actors out of unknowns, and to keep seeing Blair Hinrichsen as well develop as an actor, because you would, like you said, you wouldn't know that it was him. Quite amazing, really. So it'd be really interesting to see if these kids
go on to do other things.
Yeah, like obviously everyone does multiple things, but it would be great to see them acting again in the future. So good stuff. Brutal, horribly violent,
brutal beings.
Is that a better title?
Yes.
It's probably not going to sell as well, is it? But we like this. And it's going to be out to rent and buy, I think, on the 30th of January. So recommend going to see it, would you?
Yes, I would. But prepare yourself emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. This is the toughest watch I think we've had, isn't it? And we've seen some tough things. So thanks, Ellie.
Thanks, Rob.
And we'll be back again soonish with something else.
See you soon.
Certainly not the easiest film to watch. In fact, it's pretty devastating in parts. But it is worth your time, and as I said, it's released digitally in the UK on the 30th of January. Today, as this goes out, hopefully. So sadly no cinema release for Guðmundur Guðmundsson's second feature film and collaboration with cinematographer Sturla Brandt Gruvlin. So find the biggest TV you can and bask in the gorgeous cinematography and brutal violence like you're at the pictures. Let us know what you think on Instagram and Twitter, or drop us an email at kvikmyndapod@gmail.com. As I mentioned in the chat, this series will be dropping in a slightly different pattern to usual, but we will continue to record episodes over the coming weeks, and we will let you know before they hit your podcast feeds. So stay tuned. See you soon. Tack och bless. Thanks and goodbye.